All right, this is a little update on the Yellow Speed Racing, or YSR, coilovers. Now, it's been a while, I admit that. I've been busy working on the RX-8 because there's a chance to go racing this week, and the car's ready. It's not completely done. But I had some tips for people who might get involved in this. And the tips are, don't release the ABC shock all the way. And what do I mean by that? Don't release all the nuggets, the nuts up on the top. And you're going, well, why? Well, because as you try to get it out, you're going to discover that it hits this arm down here. And it's going to be a pain in the ass. It's heavy, it's flopping down. And if you release that nut that's holding it, you lose the ability to manage the bottom end. I learned that. The other thing about installing these is run this up all the way. Make this shock as short as possible. Why? Because there isn't a lot of space in here. And if you make this longer than it should be, trying to get the shock in is going to be a pain in the butt because there just isn't enough space. So that's what I did on the driver's side. Try to get a little better light. So I shortened this shock all the way. I've since lengthened it, just so you know that. For those of you who paid attention, you're saying, well, that looks longer. Well, it is. Because what you do is you take this very compressed shock, which has been screwed so it's smaller, as small as you can physically make it. You then lengthen it while it's in this support here. The next step is to take a hydraulic jack like this one and lift this control arm, or whatever it is. Now, when you lift it, you start to strike the bottom of the shock here. And that will start to lift the whole shock assembly up. Because these things are heavy. And yes, it would be easier to do with another person, but I don't have another person here. Then on the top of the shock, you put a piece of blue tape, which tells you where the forward-facing thread is here. Now, this is obviously the ABC shock, so don't get confused. You put a little piece of blue tape here, so as you're raising this up, you can rotate the shock back and forth and line it up with the holes on the top. And by lining it up with the holes at the top, you then gently raise this hydraulic jack up. And this is when you need to start lengthening the shock, because this piece here will not effectively raise the shock as an assembly unless you lengthen it. So I just lengthened it, elevated the whole shock up until it just touched up there where it's supposed to be screwed in. I then lowered it down, 2 or 3 inches, lengthened the shock by turning it counterclockwise, making it longer, then testing the lifting it up until I touched just the top up there and realized that I had enough extra leeway that I could go another inch or two, because these bolts on the top of the shock, 3/4 of an inch, an inch. I then got it to the point where I was able to rotate this shock by looking at the little piece of blue tape, which I obviously didn't show you, and it lined up with the hole, the bolt hole, the stud hole in the car. And sorry about jerking around like this. Once I got this stud and this stud and this stud lined up, I then took the nut and gently screwed them on. These have already been tightened down. This one is a problem, so you have to use a open box wrench to get it. But it worked. Once I got these three, 1, 2, 3, lined up, and I had some nuts on them, I only tightened them about halfway, just so they wouldn't drop down, and I had good alignment, and I had some wiggleability. Wiggleability is a word. I just don't know what planet it's from. Once I got that in, on top, I then lengthened the shock by turning it counterclockwise until it lined up with this bolt hole. The bolt's in there now. I took a screwdriver, put it in there, and then I adjusted this to the point where it was nice and centered. The other thing I had to do was do the same thing here. And you can see the screwdriver in there. And if I let it down, it will give me a nice straight shot with the bolt that goes there. Got this bolt here. It's all lined up. So that's the way I got the shock in. Was shorten it all the way, make it as small as possible, fit it in, use a hydraulic jack to lift up this arm, then realized the shock was too short to actually lift it up. Then lengthened the shock. You can see that I probably lengthened it from, I had it screwed up all the way so it was touching this zip tie. Had it all the way up so this piece was touching there. Got it up and then just turned it, made it longer, then adjusted it so that it would be long enough to raise it up into those 3 holes up in the top. Got the nuts started on it, and then started to fine tune this arm so that this part of the shock was lined up with the bolt. So I slid the bolt in, it's not tightened all the way, and then adjusted this part here where you see the screwdriver sitting in. Now that required me to pull out, readjust, pull out, readjust, because these things don't come at the correct length. You wouldn't expect them to. When I finally got that screwdriver lined up and this lined up, I knew I was pretty close to where it should be. It doesn't hit anything. It's not fully tightened, but that's the goal I've done. Now, since I am removing all the hydraulic lines, I have loosened them here. I've loosened them underneath here, because once this vehicle gets on the lift, we will then start to remove all these hydraulic lines. Don't need them. Now, you don't have to do that. You can obviously leave these hydraulic lines in place, but I don't plan on using those lines, so there's no reason for them to, one, weigh the car down and then potentially have lots of rattling going on. It's just too much work. And by loosening them now, when the car is up on the lift, I won't have to take the wheel off. Well, probably the wheel will be off anyway, and then struggle with trying to get this loose. It's already been taken off. It'll clean it up a little bit. Now I'm going to do the other side today. And of course, I may come up with a better system. But this one looks pretty good. I've got to tighten things down. I'm not going to tighten them all the way because obviously there's some things that may need some adjustment. But that's an easier approach. Now this is all I loosened. This bolt and the bolt that sits up there. Oops, screwdriver out, gravity. I did not loosen any other parts. Didn't loosen the brakes, didn't loosen any control arms, nothing. Now, I had to figure this out on my own, which is fine, because not a lot of people do S-classes. This is just sort of a different rear suspension than some of the SLs, etc. On the SLs, I think you go into the trunk. In this one, you go at the top of the parcel shelf in the back. Hope this helps somebody. I'm glad it's working out so far for me. It is, I think, the 26th of April. It's about 45 degrees outside and a little cold, but that's all right. We've had a fair amount of rain. That means the lawn will grow nice. because it's wet and it's getting in the 50s and 60s, which grass loves to grow in the 50s and 60s. Oh yeah, this was to catch goop draining out. Yeah, that's from this hose for the ABC system. It started to drain. Be prepared for ABC fluid or CHF 11 to drain out. It will. And I'm just showing you around the picture what I've been doing so that you can at least have some idea of what's going on. You can see what an S-Class suspension is on an S55. And we'll go from there. So everybody, I hope you're having a great day. As always, if you do listen to this, if you just hit the like button, it would be nice. Sort of an ego stroke. And those of you who are doing S55s, you're converting them from ABC to coilovers. Are you using a Strutmaster? Are you using the Yellow Spring Racing Dynamic Pro Sport? It's interesting because there isn't a lot about this. So hopefully we'll get something done. Love you all. Talk to you later. Bye.